Good evening, ladies and gentlemen of YouTube. It is currently 3:13 p.m. Central Standard Time here in Jackson, West Tennessee. And today I don't want to perpetuate any social inequalities amongst anybody, but I want to share with everybody what I've learned throughout this past semester with a little writing. Now, throughout the semester, I took a course, and one of the required course readings was Cory Doctorow's Little Brother. Cory Doctorow's Little Brother is quite possibly one of the most substantive pieces of fiction literature pertaining to the entirety of the sociological technology atmosphere of America. So, what I want to do today is, after reading the book twice, actually, I just keep going back to it, but after reading it twice, I found that there are very, very, very deep political implications in the book. And that's not, I don't want to, don't let that scare you. All of this is good stuff, okay? The point of the book, spoiler alert, I'm not gonna tell you what the end is. I'm just gonna give some general background, okay? Here's the reading. There have been a multitude of political battles in the name of freedom and security throughout the United States history. Some of the battles are physical, while others are more mental in nature. In Cory Doctorow's 2008 novel Little Brother, the perennial argument of whether freedom or security is more important to the American people is brought to life in an understandable and relatable manner. The protagonist of the story, American citizen and teenager Marcus Yallow, is a relatable figure in his high-technology, freedom-focused path all throughout the novel. This analysis will be reflective of his major action as the protagonist, the implications for concepts of American political thought of those actions, and what historical political thinkers have faced similar conflicts in their respective times. So, very early in the novel, the 17-year-old Marcus Yallow, along with his friend group Daryl, Jolu, and Van, display the typical American teenage life, with the exception of extensive surveillance by their school. This surveillance comes in the way of gait pattern trackers, facial recognition devices, and microchips embedded in their textbooks. Now, I just want to do an aside here. How many people have ever gone to a public library and realized that there are actually censored chips in the back of the novels or the books that they check out? Just going to throw that one out there. Moving on. Upon skipping school for a day of Harajuku Fun Madness, which is the trendy teenage multiplayer game, the group is hauled off by the Department of Homeland Security, or the DHS, as primary suspects in a terrorist attack. This marks the first major action in the novel. So, further throughout this initial abduction into the custody of the DHS, Yallow is treated like a criminal from the very beginning. He has a black bag put over his head. He's bound in handcuffs. And he is forcibly sat aside in an incident response vehicle. Now, for those of you who do not know what an incident response vehicle looks like, Google APC, Armored Personnel Carrier, and that will give you a rough idea as to what I'm talking about. They're fairly large vehicles. Either way, he is interrogated as a suspect of terrorism for possession of a cell phone and skipping school. Although this is contrary to school policy and morally wrong, Marcus is innocent of any involvement in the bombing of the Bay Bridge in San Francisco. Spoiler, sorry. But if you read the book, you're going to find it out. Marcus, having an understanding of his fundamental constitutional rights, asks repeatedly, "Am I being arrested?" With no definitive answer to his question, he goes on to demand a lawyer, once again invoking his right to an attorney under the Constitution. His interrogator, severe haircut lady, as she is called, finds this otherwise innocent request as being uncooperative and neither explains nor allows Marcus his rights in light of what he calls, or what she calls, quote, the worst terrorist attack in American history. So, now that we've got the background covered, we can actually go into the substantive argument. The implication for concepts of American political thought in Marcus's first major action are that despite being guaranteed inalienable rights by the United States Constitution, yes, I know that's actually found in the Declaration of Independence, but, that aside, by the United States Constitution, his invocation of these rights during what the United States government's Department of Homeland Security sees as wartime are met with a perspective of insubordination to the U.S. government, as being uncooperative. Here, the argument of whether freedom or security is more important to an American begins in the novel. This is the first major event that you can draw parallels to as far as ideological thinking goes. With eerie reflections of the September 11th attacks, Doctorow introduces a very possible situation in American society. In current American political thought, there is a very high emphasis placed upon the individual citizen. We, as individual American citizens, are guaranteed certain rights and liberties as outlined by the Constitution. I've taken constitutional law courses. I've got a Black's Law Dictionary. I would dare say that I own probably 7 or 8 books where the Constitution is found throughout or in the back of the book. So, come on, guys. Constitutional law here. So, we as individual American citizens are guaranteed certain rights and liberties, as outlined by the Constitution. In modern American culture, these extend to every facet of life. In these rights, they extend to every facet of life in America. Okay, that's not social. That's not a specific facet. That's not a specific area of a person's life. Public, private, professional, corporate, any of it. Okay, it applies consistently throughout. Okay. So, in continuance, from the right to free speech to the right to dissent from the United States government, these rights are supposed to be inviolable. In other words, they cannot be violated by neither man nor government. In Doctorow's novel, Marcus Yellow is no different from any American layman in the information age. Spoiler alert, we're living in the information age. Wow. But, either way, and this makes Yellow's abduction and questioning a very real theoretical possibility in American politics with regard to the argument of freedom versus security. So, once again, this trend continues all throughout the novel. After Marcus's release, yes, he does actually get released, and once again, spoiler alert, from DHS custody until the climax, in my opinion, of the novel. And the next major action, which I addressed, which it's kind of strange. Of course, the first major action, I'm throwing the first major action into play, and then I'm explaining the last major action. So, there's a whole lot of background material between point A and point B that you would just have to read the book yourself to find out about, but once again, highly recommend it. Cory Doctorow's little brother. Anyway, the next major action I want to address is Marcus's trial after his release from quote-unquote Guantanamo by the Bay. It's hilarious, but it's also very, very troubling. The place Marcus had been detained to after his construction of the X-Net. Okay. Didn't even go into detail in this paper on that one. That's something you really need to read about. Marcus was imprisoned, deprived of life, and eventually tortured by DHS for nothing more than a suspicion. Marcus's trial ended with a conviction of a misdemeanor of petty theft of a cell phone, to which he was sentenced to a minor fine and to a 3-month day release program. So basically what he had to do was he had to report into a halfway house where during the night he would have to stay there, but during the day he was free to go and work at his job. It's very interesting. This is important for its implication for an incredibly important concept of American political and jurisprudential thought, and that is the right to a fair and speedy trial. Despite Marcus's use of the X-Net to expose the horrors that the Department of Homeland Security was committing against other American citizens, being viewed by the DHS as an act of quote-unquote cyber terrorism, based upon reasonable suspicion, he was disallowed the most important rights afforded to him by law. Now, if you didn't catch that, I'm going to read that one more time. It's a really lengthy sentence, and I really should have broke it up, but it's a lot of material. So, despite Marcus's use of the X-Net to expose the horrors that the Department of Homeland Security was committing against other American citizens, being viewed by the DHS as an act of cyber terrorism based upon unreasonable suspicion, he was disallowed the most important rights afforded to him by law. This was not over the course of a week either. The plot implies that the DHS's attack on American freedom took place over months. For any falsely accused person, this is the epitome of a miscarriage of justice. The precedent set is that by no measure of the imagination should an American citizen be unlawfully detained for an indefinite period of time without cause. I suggest now that you go and, with your smart device, with your any belonging that has the Constitution in it, go and read the Fourth Amendment. Anyway, this is a fundamental idea of American jurisprudence and law, making it very applicable to American political thought also, because they do go hand in hand. Turning to the topic of historical figures in American politics, both past and present, okay, didn't just limit it to historical background. This is a very modern concept. Harry Truman, John F. Kennedy, Richard Nixon, Ronald Reagan, and even our current president, Donald J. Trump, have faced the political conflict between freedom and security in a similar but unique manner as Marcus in their respective times. The only difference are the identities involved in the conflict and their time period. The conflict, that's what the study of political science is all about, and that's what I spend a lot of time thinking about, is conflict. The conflict remains identical throughout history. Just like Marcus, these presidents have been figureheads of movements for freedom alongside security. So, I want to make the point there, I'm not pitting freedom versus security. I am recalling these historical instances as catalysts for both freedom and security. Freedom alongside security. Harry Truman's Marshall Plan was a solution to the conflict after World War I, carefully balancing freedom with security. John F. Kennedy's authorization of the Bay of Pigs invasion of Cuba in response to Nikita Khrushchev's nuclear proliferation were both instances of political conflict involving the argument between freedom and security. Richard Nixon and the Watergate scandal was certainly a conflict between the freedom of information and the security of government. It led to a constitutional crisis. If you don't know what that is, I recommend you look it up right now. It's fascinating. At least to me, I'm a nerd, whatever. The passing of the Freedom of Information Act and the creation of the United States Office of Independent Counsel. Also recommend people read those. But Ronald Reagan's presidency during the fall of communism in Eastern Europe and his signature of the Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces Treaty with Soviet leader Mikhail Gorbachev is a tangible, tangible, meaning, I'm not kidding, I have a copy of it. You can hold it in your hands. Is a tangible reflection of a resolution on the conflict between freedom and security. The security of the entire world was deemed essential to ensuring humanity's freedom as a whole. Donald J. Trump's presidency faces the conflict of freedom versus security by way of foreign policy as a response to global terrorism. The president's response to the ongoing Syrian civil war is one example. Another is the promise of increased border security, a project that is in the hands of the United States Customs and Border Protection Division of the United States Department of Homeland Security. This example, being the most modern, is eerily similar to the plot of Doctorow's novel. So, in conclusion, the ideological debate between which is more important, freedom or security, continues as a perennial question of American political thought to this day. Although Cory Doctorow's novel is science fiction, Marcus Yallo and his major actions as the protagonist throughout the story posits a very possible response to the United States to domestic terrorism through the eyes of a teenager, the youth. Much like the historical figures in American politics who preceded his character, Marcus Yallo faced the political crisis between giving up freedom in the name of security versus giving up security in the name of freedom. My sources are Michael S. Cummings' American Political Thought, 6th edition, published in Los Angeles, 2013, blah, 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 blah. Cory Doctorow, the novel, just reading the novel. You can read the biographies of all of the people whom I listed as far as historical political figures and presidents go, and see for yourself that in every respective time period of American political movement, if you will, every major political figure at one point or another has to face the perennial argument between freedom and security. We've effectively come to eliminate the argument. Essentially, when I say we, I'm talking about we as the American people, we as the American legislative body, we as the people who elect our leaders to make our decisions on our behalf, have essentially the most reflective form of government in response to the argument between freedom and security. So what I mean by that is, if you don't think that you are free enough, then you, as an American citizen, are guaranteed constitutional rights, moreover liberties, to demonstrate your position on an issue. Likewise, if you do not believe that you are secure in your person I'm actually getting into international law and humanitarian law here, but if you don't feel as though you are secure in your person, then you, as an individual, as a citizen of the United States of America, have the right to dissent. If you feel as though you are threatened by another person, there are methods of remedying that situation. If you feel as though the potential for terrorism to exist in your area, if you think that, then you have the right to voice your concern. If you do not believe that there is a proper balance between both freedom and security here in America, or across the world for that matter, then you have a right to present your argument. Thanks, guys. I hope you'll tune in next time. I've got a whole lot more to cover, and there was a whole lot that I learned this semester, and it's highly conducive to my major. But anyway, peace out, be safe, and tune in next time.
Come, let's mix where Rockefellers walk with sticks or umbrellas in their midst, putting on the Ritz.